Thank you for agreeing to participate in the State Systemic Improvement Plan focus groups. The following information should provide some background to facilitate your participation in the focus group. This presentation will help you understand the State Systemic Improvement Plan process, Illinois' response to results-driven accountability. For a number of years now, the federal government has been working to determine the impact of the programs they fund. Specifically, they would like to know how programs benefit the people they serve. This broad initiative has been broadly referred to as results-driven accountability. The Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP, initial vision for RDA focused on program compliance with the belief that compliance resulted in improved results. The current vision is an attempt to examine compliance elements as they relate to how the program improves outcomes for children with disabilities and their families. The State Systemic Improvement Plan reflects this new vision. It is an addition to the annual performance report that will focus specifically on improving outcomes for children involved in the early intervention system. The SSIP is comprised of 3 phases. We are currently in Phase 1, which needs to be completed by April 1st, 2015. Phase 1 includes several steps of analysis. Data analysis to determine measurable results and root cause. Analyze infrastructure to support improvement and build capacity. Identification of a measurable result area must be child-focused. Develop coherent improvement strategies, and create a theory of action. This graphic demonstrates how Phase 1 components fit together. The focus groups are part of the data analysis portion. The Bureau has already examined quantitative data from Cornerstone and is now completing its data analysis by collecting qualitative data from stakeholders in the chosen innovation zones. The information you will provide is an integral part of this process. Phase 2 focuses on building capacity and scaling up implementation, while Phase 3 focuses on evaluation and revision of processes and strategies. The state-identified measurable result is the outcome that is expected to change as a result of the implementation of strategies. It is all about data and all about children. It is not about the process and must be measurable and tied to a change in outcome performance. While this is a requirement, it should be acknowledged that this is really what we want to know about our program, how we can improve results for the children and families who participate in early intervention. We are going to briefly walk through the data that has been examined and how it helped to influence which performance outcome would be targeted and in what areas of the state. In early intervention, we have 2 primary performance measures: child outcomes and family outcomes. Early information from OSEP indicated that the focus needed to be on child performance, so child outcomes were selected as our performance measure. In early intervention, child outcomes provide information about how a child's development changes while in the system. Outcome ratings are to be obtained at initial, annual, and exit IFSP meetings. Ratings are intended to reflect the IFSP team's consensus about the child's developmental status at a point in time. It should be informed by multiple sources of information and compares each child's functioning to expected functioning for the child's same-aged peers. The 3 outcomes for which children receive ratings are positive social-emotional skills, acquisition and use of knowledge and skills, and use of appropriate behavior to meet needs. To understand each child's growth, a child's performance is assigned a rating at system entry and exit. Progress is measured by the change that occurs between these 2 points. The progress is then categorized to reflect the type of change that has occurred. These categories range from children who did not improve functioning to children who leave the program functioning comparable to same-aged peers. These progress categories are then used to calculate the summary statements submitted in our annual performance report. We report on two measures. Summary Statement 1, of those children who entered the program below age expectations in each outcome, the percent who substantially increased their rate of growth by the time they turned 3 years of age or exited the program. And Summary Statement 2, the percent of children who were functioning within age expectations in each outcome by the time they turned 3 years of age or exited the program. One of the first pieces of quantitative data that we examined was our child outcomes data for Summary Statements 1 and 2. A comparison between Illinois' and national data on both summary statements for the three outcomes can be seen here. Illinois is only slightly below national performance in one area. We chose Summary Statement 1, greater than expected growth, versus reaching expectations, because we know that some of the children we serve have disabilities that, despite the best intervention, will not reach age-expected functioning. The next slide will show individual progress categories for each of the three outcomes. These charts demonstrate statewide performance for all three outcomes and their progress categories. In general, we expect a bell curve with fewer numbers of children in the no progress and maintaining age expectations categories. We have concerns about the data for positive social relationships, as it is probably inappropriately positively skewed given the large number of children in our system with communication delays. It may reflect a lack of understanding about the critical role that communication plays in positive social-emotional skills. This chart reflects the performance of children living in the innovation zone's performance on acquisition and use of knowledge and skills. Though there are 7 innovation zones, the performance of only 4 are reflected here. The other zones had too few matched entry and exit pairs to serve as a reliable source of comparison. This chart illustrates the performance of the children in the selected innovation zones on the first outcome, positive social-emotional skills. This chart shows children's performance on the third outcome, taking appropriate action to meet their needs. This graph illustrates another way that we looked at performance on the child outcomes measure. This illustrates performance in each progress category for the entire state and the selected innovation zones. The innovation zones that were selected have higher percentage of children than the statewide percentage in Category B. This progress category includes children who demonstrate improvement but who do not move nearer to same-aged peers. The next area of data that was utilized to determine which innovation zone might be selected was participation rate. This seemed to be a valuable variable to examine because you can't improve results for children who need the program but don't participate. This graphic illustrates some of the information that informed the participation part of the selection process. This statewide illustration shows areas whose participation is above and below the state median participation. White areas indicate areas where no children are missing. While the statewide illustration provides a general overview, we wanted to know how the innovation zones performed relative to the state median. This graphic shows how the selected innovation zones have lower participation rates than the state average. We took this participation analysis one step further by isolating the zip codes within each innovation zone. The individual zip codes were then coded into two groups, above and below the median, as illustrated in Figure 4. You can see that specific zip codes in the Aurora, Williamson County, and East St. Louis innovation zones fell below the median participation rate, with values as low as 2.3% for areas of Williamson County and 1.5% for a specific zip code in East St. Louis. Given the issues that were being explored through the innovation zones, we wanted to see if there were specific groups that demonstrated different patterns with regard to both referral and retention. We first looked at referrals that did not result in IFSPs. This chart shows cases closed prior to IFSP development by 3 important termination reasons: ineligible, unable to contact, and voluntary withdrawal. Aurora had a higher number of children who were referred to EI, but closed due to loss of contact than the state average. While all three select eligible percentages higher than the state average, the number of children who did not receive services due to EI ineligibility is strikingly higher for Williamson. We also wanted to see if case closure reasons differentially impacted different racial groups. The blue bar shows the statewide breakdown by race of children whose cases closed without an IFSP. The orange bar shows that when we examine terminations due to unable to contact prior to IFSP development, Black children in FY 2013 are overrepresented compared to the state, 18%, and white children are underrepresented. It is important to note that Hispanic children are not isolated as a group in these charts and are likely spread across the various racial groups. A similar analysis was run using social economic status as a variable, and no significant differences were found. Next, we wanted to examine retention. We wanted to see how things varied for children who were eligible for the program with IFSPs. This chart shows the breakdown by case closure code for the state and the selected innovation zones. You can see that East St. Louis has a higher number of children with IFSPs closed due to loss of contact compared to the state. East St. Louis and Williamson County also have higher numbers of children closed due to EI ineligibility than the state average. We also wanted to see if children with IFSPs across races were impacted equally in our inability to contact them. We see a similar pattern as those who did not receive an IFSP. Black children, 32.6%, who had IFSPs were lost to contact in innovation zones twice as much as the state average of 16.1%. To further disaggregate the data, we looked at whether we were unable to contact children similarly across various income brackets. You can see from this chart, however, that the number of low-income children, 92.4%, who received services and closed due to loss of contact in FY 2013 are significantly overrepresented compared to the state average for all case closure reasons, 71.7%. While we have used available data for these analyses, a number of concerns with the quality of the data have arisen. First, although we have used the statewide performance for comparison, in some instances, even the statewide performance does not necessarily reflect the desired level of performance. Second, our ability to draw accurate conclusions has been limited in some areas due to the limited amount of available data, or matched pairs, for child outcomes. Third, as we examine the data more closely, we realize that some observed patterns demonstrate concerns about the accuracy of available data. For instance, available data may not demonstrate expected patterns given other information that we have. These problems with our data limit the confidence with which we can draw conclusions. All that being said, we must use what we have while we continue to improve the quality of our data. This chart summarizes how the data informed our selection process. Ultimately, we used the data we just reviewed in addition to a couple of other factors to inform our decision. We wanted to choose an area where additional resources were available, where the race to the top focus aligned with early intervention, and where we could make an impact. This chart reflects each zone's performance on the criteria used to make this selection. We wanted to ensure aspects of diversity so that successful strategies could be applied throughout the state. We also looked at performance on child outcomes, participation rate compared to state average, and diversity in terms of the race, ethnicity of the population. The geography factor considered both geographic region of the state as well as population density or proximity to metropolitan areas. Lee Powell, the Director of Program Innovation, who is overseeing Innovation Zone efforts, provided input about the focus of each Innovation Zone in terms of alignment with birth to 3 and special needs populations. All Innovation Zones demonstrated concerns with issues related to poverty. We also examined how each Innovation Zone was impacted by loss of contact with children who did have an IFSP, as well as those who did not obtain an IFSP. Based on these criteria, the Aurora, East St. Louis, and Williamson County Innovation Zones were selected as pilots for SSIP strategies. Based on the review of quantitative data and the need to focus on results, we decided to work to improve the percentage of children who demonstrate greater than expected progress relative to Child Outcome 2, acquisition and use of knowledge and skills. By choosing Innovation Zones, we have the opportunity to link efforts and leverage resources. The race to the top focus is on school readiness, and the chosen outcome aligns nicely with this goal. The next task is the SSIP process, is gathering qualitative data. This is where you can help. Remember the earlier graph that included data analysis to determine root cause? This is where qualitative information becomes critical. The purpose of the focus groups is to determine root causes that are impacting children's performance. A root cause is something that can be influenced and controlled, and if corrected, may prevent the problem in the future. While the focus group facilitator will help with this process, we are ultimately hoping that identified root causes represent a consensus of focus group participants, will impact the problems identified, identify factors that can be influenced or controlled, form a rationale for selecting useful strategies, and prevent the problem from occurring again in the future. As a focus group participant, you will help us identify the things that matter so that we can target strategies at aspects we can control. Why is your participation important? Because the SSIP initiative is all about infants and toddlers with disabilities, their families, and you. The information you provide will guide strategy development. Strategies will be implemented within the pilot sites and evaluated for success. By building local capacity, we hope to not only improve results for children within the identified sites, but also to learn what strategies would be useful for improving results for all EI-enrolled infants and toddlers.